Bruchim Abayim B'Shem Hashem, B'Shem Egan יותר. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov's Mishlita on building a Sukkah practical guide. Dini B'niyas a Sukkah. Sponsoring a shir called Egan יותר 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rav Smith.
Nice to hire someone. They hired a guy to build a sukkah, and the plan was that the Yidden would put up the schach, the guy would build the sukkah. The Maisa, people were busy, they forgot, and it came sukkahs, they were sitting by the sukkah, and they realized that the guy made the schach and the walls. And the question is, can you make a bracha on this sukkah? Is the sukkah kosher or not? A similar shal I once heard where today is very possible because they have these lightweight bamboo mats that Lamaisa, either an Isha, a woman, or a katan put on the schach beside. They didn't build the walls, they put on the schach. So if you notice, the question is, what are the halachos regarding the schach of the sukkah or the building of the sukkah? Do you need a bar chiyuva? Does it have to be made lishma? A guy can make a lishma. Tell you an interesting shayla happened last time. Abdan Segel was here in America, so he davened Yom Tovim. He davened in the Stolona yeshiva, and he needed a sukkah for some reason. He needed, I think, to drink something, and there's no sukkah in the yeshiva because there's no one yeshiva over Yom Tov. Someone pointed across the street. They were selling sukkahs before sukkahs, and there was a sample sukkah that was still standing. So he went inside, it looked kosher, the walls were good, the schach was good. Someone else said, no, it wasn't, that sukkah was not made to eat in it, it was made to sell, like a l'schoira. And someone else said, what are you talking? We have to have l'shma by building the sukkah. So that's our sukkah for today. Are there any halachas regarding the building of the sukkah? In other words, when you have to have lishma, l'mashal by a get or by matzoh, a guy can't have lishma. Tzorchei Shabbos, for example. Tzorchei Shabbos is a mitzvah. Every year, Tanoim were busy at Tzorchei Shabbos. But if a guy bought the Tzorchei Shabbos, nothing wrong. So we have different mitzvahs. A guy builds a makkah, the makkah is kosher. Even though l'maisa, he didn't make lishma. So the shaila is, how do we look at the mitzvah of building a sukkah? On Avada, I want to make a point. Everybody agrees building a sukkah is an inyan. That's the first halacha post Yom Kippur. We build a sukkah, and the poskim say there is definitely a din of mitzvah by Yosef מבשלוחו, and more so even a Talmud Chacham who's very, very prominent is allowed to build a sukkah. That's not a chesaron in his gadlus. There's a very famous picture of Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zechron Levracha sitting on a wagon that was being pulled by a horse, bringing the schach for his father, and the stiples in the background. This is the olden days before they had bamboo mats. So Reb Chaim and his father were schlepping the schach. That's fine. But the question is there a din that if a guy, a katan, an isha made the schach or made the sukkah, it's not lishma, is that psul? So l'chayra, this seems to be a fairish Gemara, and that's the Gemara in Sukkah Daf Chesam at Beis. The Gemara speaks about a sukkah's ganvach. Now we'll use that word a lot. Ganvach in the Rashi Tevis, goy, noshim, and the Beis is behema, and chaf is kusi. So if any of these four built the sukkah, zok the Gemara, the sukkah is kosher. Now behema is a little strange. You ever see a cow building a sukkah? So they speak about ma'aseh koif ba'alma. It's probably a koif did it, a monkey did it. But whatever the case is, the Gemara says beferish. We'll use this word ganvach, a sukkah that a guy made, an isha made, a behema made, or a kusi. The sukkah is kosher as long as it's made kilchasa. Frag the Gemara, of course it has to be made kilchasa. What's the chiddush? And for the Gemara, what does it mean kilchasa? This is the key words for today. V'hu she'asa l'tzeil sukkah. Avad sukkah's ganvach is kosher. It has to be made kalacha. What does halacha mean? Made l'shem tzeil. Rashi explains that l'maisa, it has to be that you made it for the shade that the sukkah offers. And Rashi spells out as no uncertain terms that even though on Sukkah doesn't have to have Lishma, but it has to be made L'Shem Tzeil. If you have any doubt, in Tov Reish Lamed Hey Sif Aleph, Zok the Mechaba Sukkah, Afa Bishlei Nasis L'Shem Mitzvah, Ksheira, V'hu Shetia Asui L'Tzeil, Kigoin Sukkahs Ganvach. So we see two important points. There is absolutely no din of Lishma by a Sukkah. And number two, it has to make L'Shem Tzeil. Now, the question is, why is L'Shem Tzeil so important? Shade sounds to be a convenience. So that's the emes, the first Amid. Rashi, the first Amid, Beis Amin Aleph Masechta Sukkah. Rashi says, Yisoid, Al Shem HaSchach Kari Sukkah. The word Sukkah is a takeover of the word schach. So if the ikka of the sukkah is schach, so if you look up in a Torah dictionary, the word sukkah means schach. In fact, you know, it has to be tzilsa, miruba, michamasa. So the word tzeil defines the sukkah. In fact, the Levush in Sif Aleph, Tov Reish Lamed Hey, that's chag of sukkah is tasel lecha. The chag, you have to make a sukkah, a chag of sukkah. What does sukkah mean? Shade. So now we see very clearly that the ikka of the sukkah is the tzeil, or we'll call it the schach. Rashi gives a few examples. What's not l'shem tzeil? Very pashut. A person made it for oitza. As the Ran says, we'll soon see a person made it for schoira. It's not l'shem tzeil. Rashi and Mr. Brewer quotes it, says a shtickle of an eid l'chidish, even if a person made it for tznius, not to sit under the shade, he wanted to be private, which is very nice. You're allowed to be private in the sukkah. But if it's made for privacy and not for tzeil, it's not good. We'll soon see. So what's the heta of having a sukkah in one's dining room? The dining room was made not l'shem sukkah, it's made l'shem bayis. We'll get to that soon. But no doubt about it, that if the sukkah was made for the Ran's Mishalom, is made l'shem oitza, it stores things in it. And now it's sukkah, let's use it for sukkah, it's puzzle. The schach has to be put up l'shem tzeil, that the sukkah really is supposed to signify. Now, one thing I want to make a point, and I'll say it once and for all: the din of l'shem tzeil is only going on the schach. The walls can be made for whatever purpose you want, because the walls are not the yikah. In other words, let's say a yid or the havdla guy built a shed. Oh, great idea! I'll make a shed, and l'shem oitza, nothing with sukkahs. Then he goes, in a few days of sukkahs, I'll just put schach on. Now, use it on sukkahs. After sukkahs, I'll put the roof on. Very good. No problem. The walls were made l'shem oitza. The answer is, like we said, al shem aschach kari sukkah. The ikka concern of tzeil is the schach has to be put up l'shem tzeil. So this is, we find in other areas of halacha, Tov Reish Lamed Beis, also that the dinim of the sukkah are primarily regarding the tzeil, the schach, and not the walls. Now let me just crystallize this point before you go weiter. If someone has a suffix, if it was made l'shem tzeil or l'shem oitza, how would you look at that? Zokti kafachayim, today's Sim Tov Reish Lamed Sif Cotton Vav quotes two gedolei olam. It's possible because this is a sveika deraisa lechumr. More so, if you have kosher schach, bamboo mats, they'll put up l'shem schoira for whatever reason. So it becomes schach psal because it was not put up correctly. The only difference is that if you have schach psal or mashal that's not gedulei karka, you can never use it. You can't kasher it. But if you put up schach l'shem schoira or l'shem oitza, it's right now it's psal. But if you take it off and put it back l'shem tzeil, you basically made it kosher. So now let's apply this to our shaylas. So first of all, the sukkah the question that I mentioned, I've done sukkah that was made l'shem schoira. Zok the Mishnas Yosef V'Chel Yudalit Simen Shin Chafei. I saw the Kov's Halachos Aleph Chav Dalit says this is absolutely psal. Believe it or not, a sukkah that was made as a sample to sell, not to sit in it, not to l'shem tzeil, is psal. We saw oitza, and this is schoira. Now, in the Chashukei Chemed, that's of Zilberstein Sefer, Masechta Sukkah, Amid Lamed Ches of this page, Amid Ches of the Sefer, he quotes Reb Chaim Kanievsky that was asked this question, and Reb Chaim, with his Geoinis, said maybe there's a makom lahakom. Why? Because the Gemara in Yevamos Daf Kuf down. This is typical Reb Chaim, who had Shas open in front of him. The Gemara says that to a minhag that's needed for the chalitza has to be a minhag that's worn. If you have a shoe from an Irani Dachet that's also to wear, you can't use it for chalitza, even though it's a physical minhag. Frag the Gemara, really? It has to be worn? Whoever wears the Bezdin chalitza minhag, it's Bezdin holds it, and they use it only for chalitza. They don't wear it when they go and they walk to daven and shul. So why is that kosher for the Gemara? And for the Gemara, well, if one of the people in Bezdin want to wear that minhag, no one's going to stop him. It's not like Irani Dachas. So Chaim says, we see from here, even though it's not designated to wear, but if people allow you to wear it, it's kosher. So why is the same thing true regarding a sukkah l'shem schayra? The Baal Bas doesn't care if you sit in that sukkah. But the emphasis is a big makam l'chalik, because when the problem is it's not royal levisha, so we can say if they let you wear it, it's royal levisha, right? But here, if it was made b'psol, if it was made, then it's not l'shem tzeil. So the fact that they're makbid, I mean, according to that svara, even l'shem tzniya should be good, and l'shem oita should be good, because l'maisa, no one's minds. So if it was a built-in psul, it doesn't have a shem sukkah. So and talk about Chashuk Chemed also asks Rabbi Chaim. So l'maisa, that sukkah, believe it or not, what? Yeah, that's what.
Low sample could be left if he has it. The Balabos is going to sell it.
Can sell it one thing, but he's going to use it the way it is. And if he made it and people could use it on sukkahs, you're right. I think we all agree. But if he made it l'shem schayr 100%, l'chayr, you can't really justify that use. Now the next question is a very, very challenging question. I hope it's not going to get to anybody here. But let's say a person built the sukkah with Allah Hidurim, made it matzoh, Yom Kippur, mitzvah, he did everything. And he comes to a shir and he hears he has to make l'shem tzeil. And to be honest, he never heard that halach in his life. He never learned the Gemara, Shulchan Aruch. What happens to a person that built a beautiful sukkah but didn't have in mind l'shem tzeil? So the emes is, it's not a problem. Because why did you build your sukkah? Not la'itza, not b'schayr. You built it for the mitzvah of sukkah. What does the mitzvah of sukkah mean? Tzeil. And Taka, I'm listening to Karela, it's in Chutshani Amid Reish. He says, for those that were never zoichet to learn Masech the Sukkah, they never heard of the word L'Shem Tzeil, it's good enough if he built L'Shem Sukkah, because Sukkah and Tzeil are Hainu Hach. And in fact, the Evan Yisrael, that's a Fishin, Chelik Zayin, Samodal, and Chelik Chesim, and Dal, he has two tshuvas, one's very long, one's a little shorter, but he says, when you build a Sukkah stama, it's kosher. Unless you have ulterior motives. But you don't have to have it, Chalois L'Shem Tzeil. It's understood L'Shem Tzeil. The Emes Rashi says that. Rashi says, it has to be made l'beina l'shem sukkah, l'beina l'shem chag, l'shem sukkah beinan, u l'tzeil. That's what the pasuk means. So l'shem sukkah is kosher. All agree you don't need l'shma. Again, nothing wrong with making l'shma, but it doesn't have to be l'shma. And the biggest raya is sukkah's ganvach is kosher. Then maybe you'll say my guy has l'shma, fine, but your behemoth doesn't have l'shma. So the fact behemoth is kosher is a raya. It doesn't have to be l'shma. Now, someone asked me, okay, so what's the mahaj when I build a sukkah? Should I have in mind l'shem tzeil, l'shem sukkah, l'shem mitzvah? So the emes is, there's no doubt about it, l'shem tzeil seems to be the most proper, because the Gemara says. In fact, I saw in this wonderful sefer Pischei Sukkah on Metzamach Beis, he quotes a story of Chaskel Abramsky, was one of the Gedolim, living in Eretz Yisrael at the time, and some Baruchim came to build a sukkah for him. So as they're working, he says, by the way, what are you having kavana when you're building my sukkah? So they said, we're having a l'shem mitzvah. He goes, you know what, l'shem mitzvah you could have in your own house. My sukkah, I want you to build l'shem tzeil. That's the Baal Halacha. Also the Brisker Rav, and the Rav Shterach and Chelik K, Simareshut quotes it, the Brisker Rav was makbid, they should say l'shem tzeil. Now the emes is that the Kafachayim in Tofresh Chafes, if you cut in your Aleph, he says, before you build a sukkah, mitzvah sukkah. The chayr, it's not a stira, because it's really hainu hach. So Rav Sternbach himself says, in my house, I have in mind both. Yerushalayim Yoetz Shneim, l'shem tzeil, and l'shem sukkah. One thing I will say, if you make it l'shem Yom Tiv, that seems to be problematic, because you make a roast to cover Yom Tiv, but the sukkah to cover Yom Tiv, what does that mean? You make the sukkah l'shem sukkah, that includes sale, but l'shem Yom Tiv, I think, is lacking a little bit in the direction. Now, l'maisa, there doesn't seem to be a din of dibur that have to say it. For example, and b'yesa be or b'yesa geshmak. The halacha is in Hilchos Tzitzis in Siman Yud Aleph Sif Aleph that you have the tzitzin they have to be spun l'shma, tviya l'shma. Sheyoyma b'tchilas hatviya, I'm doing this l'shem mitzvah. We make matzoh l'shem matzah's mitzvah. That's because you have to create a l'shma. So by a dibur you make a l'shma. But hagah ba'atzmacha, since we proved there's no din of l'shma, by a sukkah it's a ferish machaba, so why are you talking? What do you want to try to make? A l'shma? You don't need a l'shma. So the chayr, there's no din of l'shma. Now some say, they want to make sure they're doing it right, fine. But again, there's no din of dibur. But I want to mention, dibur by Yidden is very precious. The Mishnah and Simmeration on Sif Cotton Base quotes Magen Avram. Toiv sheyoyim al kol davar shekoina zeu l'chvoid Shabbos. When you buy something, everything. Ki adibur hu poyel harbe b'kedusha. Zok the machzah shekel Magen Avram, because ayidei dibur this chal more kedusha. So versteht sich, this is very tempting. You want to make a sukkah that's full of kedusha. You'll say l'shem tzeil, l'shem mitzvah. You're creating kedusha. So that's fine. That's wonderful. That's why I guess the Kaf HaChaim said hinei muchan and mezuman. But if someone didn't say anything, there's absolutely nothing wrong. There's no din of dibur regarding this. Now we can understand a little better why a person that just built a sukkah, he didn't have in mind, he didn't say anything, but again, if he's doing it l'shem sukkah, not l'shem tzchayra or oitza, this is kosher. Ma'aseh shehaya, that happened a few times, I saw other poskim speak about this. There was a big branch that somehow was detached and fell onto the sukkah. Now the emphasis, talking to younger bachrim, they don't realize that schach always wasn't bamboo mats or even bamboo. We used to go and cut down the big branches of trees, schlep it to the sukkah. It was a ganz avoida. But at the end of the day, the ma'aseh shehaya was actually that the sukkah did not have enough schach. It was chamasa meruba betzilsa. But it seemed to be a matana min hashemayim, quote unquote, that a big branch was detached, it must have been by a storm, fell onto the sukkah, and now, together with this big branch that was very wide, it became tzilsa meruba b'chamos. So the Balabas was overjoyed. He got a message min hashemayim that I love your sukkah, and l'chayrit he said it's kosher. But this is a problem, because this, believe it or not, is a situation that was not made l'shem tzeil. In fact, it wasn't made b'dei adam at all. So even a sukkah's ganvach is better than this. So this is why the Mechaber says, in a different context, in Tafresh Lamarei Sif Aleph, sukkah shenases mei Allah, psul ufi shlei nases l'tzeil. Now there is talking a different situation. There it's talking that you tasilay min ha'asli. But there zokted, but the Shevet HaLevi in Chelik Yud Siman Kuf and the Chelkas Yoyev Aleph Ches and Hagah both extend that to schach that fell off onto the sukkah. It was not made l'shem sukkah. In other words, even a ganvach is better because it was because the behema. I don't know how you may tell behema to do l'shem tzeil, but definitely the isha, the guy, and the kusi did it l'shem tzeil. So this is an important point to mention. Lo yitzur, of course. But once you have that on the sukkah is never kosher. But again, it all is not lost. Hope is not lost. All you have to do is pick up that piece of schach, that heavy branch, and put it back l'shem tzeil. In other words, had it been something that's gedulei karka, or it doesn't grow from the ground, something's not gedulei karka, or it's still attached, that's schach psul and can't be rectified. But this has a very simple remedy. Now we find the emphasis that you're allowed to pick it up and put it back. So people ask, what does that mean? How high do you have to pick it up? So someone told me alum this. Let's say that branch, it's on the sukkah, and it's psul. You have to pick it up 3 tvachim. Why? Because within 3 tvachim, we're going to say lovad. Okay? It sounded lomdish. I looked into this, and I'll tell you what I found. The Rav, in Tafresh Chavtes, Sif Chav Ches, Mishnah Berurah is kemat beferish. Rabbi Yashiv and Ashri is Chav Hei Chavav, and Seif HaSukkah, Miluyim Siman Beis, Chutshani, all say that you don't have to pick up 3 tvachim. As long as you put it down l'shem tzeil. You don't say lovad lahachmir that it's still on the sukkah. The svaras that you could say all you want, but these gedolei pais say you have to pick it up ma'at. The only one I found that says a tefach, the Chutshani in Perik Beis says you pick it up a tefach. But I also did see in the Sefer Kovetz Halachos Perek Beis and Siv Zayin, and he quotes Rav Moshe as well, that you have to pick it up 3 tvachim. To undo a psul, you have to pick it up 3 tvachim. Okay, but as I told you, most poskim seem convinced. The Sefer HaSukkah, very authoritative Sefer, he says that from all the Lishonis of the poskim, you don't have to pick it up 3 tvachim. As long as you pick it off the Sukkah and it's not on the Sukkah, putting it back should be okay. The next question is a big question, a beautiful question, Negeya very, very much. And that is, can a goy or lahavdil, I'll say it once for all, goy, lahavdil, isha or katan, put the schach onto the Sukkah? Now, until recently, women couldn't put schach, it was too big of a job. But now fakert, it's a nice kibbutz. They could put on a bamboo mat and they'll feel important. So the question basically is that can a goy, again I'll have the automatic, goy, isha and katan put up the schach of the Sukkah. So the chayr, what's the shayla? It's a Pharisee Gemara. Sukkah's ganvach is kosher. Ganvach, the first 2, is goy and isha, and nashib. But listen to a Gemara. Zogtimar in Gittin Daf Memhei Amid Beis, a Sefer Stam, Sefer Torah Tefillah Mezuzah, that a guy or an isha or a katan or a kusi wrote, and they wrote it perfectly, is psul. Why? What's wrong? The ksiva is perfect. Shenem ukshartem, and then uksaftem. Sheyeshte b'kshira, yeshte b'ksiva. But a guy, isha, katan, she'enai b'kshira, they have no mitzvah of tefillin, einai b'ksiva. And that's a psul deraisa, that you have to have a bar chiyuva. And for stam, you have to have a bar chiyuva, and if it's beautiful lettering, it makes no difference, it's possible. Kum tzigein Rabbeinu Tam, unser Rabbeinu Tam, on that toises, in that toises, mikana Rabbeinu Tam, the ein isha oigedes lulav, so putting lulav together, which is not even ma'akav, just hit the mitzvah. A woman cannot put the lulav, the das rabbis and lulav together, or nas, or ois tzitzis. The kivan loy mifkada, she is not a bar chiyuva. So Rabbeinu Tam is extending this Gemara of bar chiyuva to include eged lulav and tzitzis. Rabbi says it's pashat kipshutai, that if Rabbeinu Tam holds they can't make a lulav, hagam eged is not ma'akiv, it's pashat kipshutai they can't make a sukkah, because the other Shem Tzei is absolutely ma'akiv. So this is the pella Rabbeinu Tam shita. The kasha Rabbeinu Tam is, Rabbeinu Tam didn't forget the Gemara. Sukkah's ganvach is kosher. Toys asks a different question. Why did the Gemara speak about stam being psul? Because it says kshartem eksaftem. Who gives you the license to apply that to other mitzvahs? Maybe it's geras hakosiv, kshartem eksaftem. And therefore Tosfos says, I don't agree to Rabbeinu Tam, and he very much rejects to Rabbeinu Tam. So we have a fundamental machlokes gedoylei rishonim, we call it Tosfos and Rabbeinu Tam, if the din of bar chiyuva goes on all mitzvahs or only when it's specified. Rabbeinu Tam, the same Rabbeinu Tam that wears tefillin and keep his man, he holds that by sukkah, eged, tzitzis, it's also possible. Now, lamaisa, how do we paskin? So it's very clear in Silchas Tzitzis, Archaim Siman Yudalit, the Mechaber says that a tzitz that a goy made is psul. Now, this all agree, nothing to Rabbeinu Tam. Why? Because the pasuk says, "Daber b'nei Yisrael v'asu lem tzitzis." Daber el b'nei Yisrael zok the Gemara, but not akur. So that's pashut. A goy making tzitzis is psul. First Mechaber and less van the polit. But the question is, how about an isha? How about a katan? According to Rabbeinu Tam, it should be psul. Zok the Mechaber isha ksheira l'asoi. So with those three words, the Mechaber rejected Rabbeinu Tam. And Taka the Taz says that the Mechaber does not go to Rabbeinu Tam. You don't need bar chayuva only by tzitzis, because it's only goy tzitzis, and of course by stam. The Ramah, the Yesh Machmirim, l'chayr is talking about Rabbeinu Tam. L'hatztrich anoshim, b'toiv laseis kein l'chatchila. 2 out of the 4 words are mild. Toiv l'chatchila. So now we see that basically the Mechaber does not at all hold like Rabbeinu Tam. The Ramah also doesn't. But toiv l'chatchila, why not? What's interesting to me is the Ben Ish Chai and Lech Lecha Beis and the Kaf HaChaim Ziv Cotton Dalid both say that, I guess, we Svardim should also be machmir like Rabbeinu Tam. In other words, they don't usually go with the Mechaber, here they go to Ramah. Okay, fine. But you have to be machalik, you have to realize, you have to be accurate. all agree that it's kosher. If you don't go to Beinu Tam, it's kosher. It's just a toiv l'chatchila. So now we see that the Lamaisa mi'ikad din, that it would be kosher by an isha. How about a katan? A katan even more so. A katan, his problem is what we call a mum oiver. He's just too young. But he is a bar chiyuva. But Lamaisa, it would come out if an isha or a katan put on schach, and it's ready Yom Kippur, there's nothing you could do, avad it's kosher. Because according to Beinu Tam, it might be psul, but we don't go to Beinu Tam. But here, listen to this. Comes again the Magen Avram, and see if cotton you dalid. Loite Beinu Tam, that you have to be bar chiyuva, so an isha cannot make lulav, sukkah, ayam ashik is echtoiv simen tov reish memtes. And the attack of the Ramah writes, lulav sha'ogdu akum, v'asai kasha, is kasha k'may sukkah's akum. So Ramah used some modern loshim. If a guy made a sukkah like he made dalad minim, it's kasha. So the Magen Avraham is mashvat chilanat. Why? Al Beinu Tam. So that's a strange thing. That Machab there, the Ramah is a shtikal machma, which we saw earlier. But you know what's interesting? The Ramah, the Magen Avraham continues. V'chein kasa hagoyis maimini b'shem Rabbeinu Tam, and Lamaisa he only asked a kasha. What's wrong if a guy was ma'agid the lulav lulav ain't tzarich eged? Teretz even for hidden mitzvah yoifi mitzvah a guy should not do it. So here the Ramah is the shitasai. Simen Yudalid toiv l'chatchila and Tov Reish Mem Tes also l'chatchila. So now we come out with a little of a problem. That means the chatchila, a goy should not put up the schach, a cotton, an isha shouldn't as well. So here we have a chiddush, but it's not such a chiddush, because the Chachma Shloim Bekluga on the page in Tov Reish Lamed Hey, and the Bekura Yankov, Sif Cotton Bays, both say, Sukkah's ganvach is kosher. What are you talking about that you shouldn't do it? There it says, it's kosher miyikidin, al tzilcha sukkah. But it's psul, according to Beinu Tam, alt bar chiyuva. But we're not really choishes b'di'evet like the Azoi Vait, but l'chatchila, a goy should not, isha cotton should not make the sukkah. Now before we apply this more specifically, there's one point I must tell you. And that is, on the Ramah, that an isha, a goy should not put on tzitzis, that's the first halacha. And the Ramah says isha should also not. The Mishnah Berurah says, why shouldn't an isha put on tzitzis? Because the pasuk is daber el bnei Yisrael, v'loy bnei Yisrael. Where'd you get that drasha from? It's not a Gemara. That's the Maram, one of the Rishonim, Maram. Maram holds that women should also not put on tzitzis because the same problem. The Gemara is talking about bnei Yisrael, lafuki akum. But he's saying bnei Yisrael, v'loy bnei Yisrael. Zok to be halacha, why did I write the reason Bnei Yisrael? Why did I say not bar chiyuva? Zok to be halacha, beautiful pshat. Because we don't pass like a Beinu Tam. So I'm not going to support Beinu Tam. The only consideration is Bnei Yisrael v'loi Bnei Yisrael. Chiddush. What does that mean, Grada? According to this, can a cotton put on tzitzis? Why not? He's a Bnei Yisrael, he's a boy. So here the Mishnah Berurah Mamish took the Beinu Tam and put it totally on the side. It's only a problem of this homemade chumrah of Bnei Yisrael v'noi Bnei Yisrael. And Zok to be halacha, that Lamaisa, it should be that Lamaisa cotton could do it. But since Lamaisa, I did see the Prima Godim and their Chaim says Yibechosh Rabbeinu Tam, so that's all inclusive. If you're not a bar chiyuva, you can't do it. Now let's be very clear. La locha lamaisa, an isha or a cotton put on schach, it's kosher. We don't pass the Beinu Tam. But if you want to do it lechatchila, the right way to do it, don't have an isha or a cotton put up the schach, because either you have bnei v'loy b'nois, which excludes nashim, or even the Allah himself says prima godim, Beinu Tam. Lechatchila, one should not have a isha or a cotton put up the schach. And Takai's, what? Doesn't make a difference. That's not, but the Maisa, they're part from the mitzvah. So you can't say they're allowed to do it, they're part of the mitzvah. And the Maisa, the Paiskim, the Voslan says, the Ber Moshe says is, you want to do it lechatchila, don't have an isha do it. Even though if it's done, it's kosher. Because again, the whole Bnei and Bnei Yisrael is only Maram. Now, what's interesting, what three Gedolei Achronim, behind the Gedolim, took the similar approach, because the biggest kasha is, Rabbeinu Tam says that a guy that makes it is psul. I Sukkah's Ganvach. So let me ask you a question. A beautiful, beautiful Yesod. Can a guy make a shofar? He takes the ram's horn and he fashions it, whatever they have to do. Can a guy spin the tzitzis? The shema has to be the tviyah. Can he spin the tzitzis? The original, the cotton wool, whatever it is. So this is klar. A guy can make a shofar. A guy could make the original wool. It has to be made l'shem tzitzis, but they can make the wool. So what's the chiluk? To make a cheftzah shel mitzvah is not a problem. The dik is when to give kedusha to a mitzvah, that's the problem. Zogt me Adam is man chelik alef simen tzadik tes. The Alicha Shloima says it a little different in Perik Ches Ha'ora 52, and Rav Moshe has a beautiful tshuva in chelik Kesim and Mem Sif Katan Gimel. And they all basically say making a sukkah until you sit in it has no kedusha. So the sukkah before you sit in it is not the full cheftzah mitzvah. And Taka, the Rav Sternbach compares it to a making of a shofar. That even Rabbeinu Tam does not go to the extent that you can't have a guy make a shofar or making the original wool. So their chiddush from different angles is that making the sukkah is not a kosher sukkah until it has the kedusha of sitting in it. Okay, but the mice, this is all the fear of Rabbeinu Tam. Let's be very clear. I want to be very clear. La halacha, if a guy, Isha or a katan made the sukkah l'shem tzeil, it's kosher. No one could argue in the Gemara. Rabbeinu Tam had a problem beside bar chiyuva, which most poskim rejected, except the toiv l'chatchila. No, the Maram had a problem with women, but a katan mi'ikidin should be kosher. Yet after all this, let me tell you, and that's really the real halacha l'maisa, the chidon avodas hakodesh, he says, mutav sheyizor shloiti asiya aydei goy ubefrat haschach. Reb Chaim Falaji in his tshuva and Leiv Chaim, yezoy l'bal yasena aydei goy el aydei Yisrael yan ki kedushasa rabba ma'oid. Sukkah is kadosh. The Gemara says mashchag l'Hashem av sukkah l'Hashem. Even Rav Moshe, who said that a goy and a katan isha could make the sukkah, Rav Moshe says it's not proper to have a goy build the sukkah. Now that's why it's not recommended to allow a guy to build the entire sukkah with the schach, even though he does l'shem tzeil. The minhag is that we try to build the mitzvah boy, but if you have these big sukkahs and shuls and yeshivas that they need a worker, the minhag is to allow the guy to do it, but that's the walls. There's no problem. The sukkah, the schach has to be made, put up by Yidden, bar chiyuva. An isha and a cotton would be kosher, but better do it lechatchila, and an isha, cotton, or havla goy should not do it. Now the maisa, don't forget what the Sfarim HaGedoshim say, when a person sweats, when he builds a sukkah, like sweating he builds the when he bakes the matzah, that's a kapara for the grace aveira. So there's a lot of mitzvah boy, a lot of hidden mitzvah. There are more says start Motzi and Kippur building a sukkah. We shouldn't delegate that to a guy. But again, if it need a guy for the actual building, and as long as the Yid does the actual schach, that is still the chatchila. Now there's another problem which has to be ironed out, and that is when a guy builds a sukkah, are you certain he's building it l'shem tzeil? The average guy builds the sukkah for one reason, money. Okay. Now the second reason is because the Jew needs his religious observance. Right? I make money because he's religious. They like religion. But to him there's no difference, sukkah on sukkahs or Chanukah, the menorah. It's a religious observance. Does he know the tzeil? Does he know what you do with it? Do you sit in it? Maybe he knows sit in it, but does he know the Shem tzeil? So there's one of the Friedrichs was printed in Vilna, Tov Reish Lamed Hey. The Oilas Yitzchak, Chelik Asim Memtes, was asked this very question. A guy builds it because it's a Jewish religious holiday. Does that make it into Shem tzeil? Shem tzeil means you want to make a sukkah that have the shade and sit under it. So he says, he has a scary point. The Gemara's lashon is that v'husha soy l'shem tzeil is mashma stoma is not made l'shem tzeil. So he says a possible eitzah, and this I think of it. He's answering the question that I had. How could we say sukkah's ganvach behem is kosher? Does behem have das? Behem can have das l'shem tzeil? So he says, if the ganbach make the sukkah and the bailam is there, and he's thinking l'shem tzeil, that's also good. I guess that's where he would explain why ma'aser koif is mutter. Good, a monkey has enough das to make a sukkah, maybe. But where's the l'shem tzeil? But if the ganvach makes a sukkah and the yid is thinking l'shem tzeil, that it combines. But this he seems to say as a davar pashut. If he makes it just as a religious observance and knows nothing else about l'shem tzeil, it can't be kosher. It's keneged the Gemara. Rabbi Yashiv said, quoted by two of his Talmidim, Mordechai Gross and the Mechab of Shvus Yitzchak, that if he made it as a religion, but not with the pashtus of l'shem tzeil, it can't be kosher. The Gemara says, "V'hu shasoi l'shem tzeil." Now someone asked, so why does the Gemara say beferish? A guy has to make l'shem tzeil. I said the Gemara does say that. V'hu shasoi l'shem tzeil. You think that a stomach by a guy is l'shem tzeil? You can make a survey and find it out. A yid makes l'shem mitzvah. He knows what the mitzvah is, but that's why a little of a reservation that a guy should not put on the schach, even though l'shem tzeil is kosher, to make sure that it is l'shem tzeil, because l'shem tzeil is a psul even l'ikuva. Now, ma'aser shehaya, there was a makam of a tziburi, of a yeshiva, and the goyim were told, the workers were told to build the sukkah, and the yidden will put up the schach. The ma'aser, the goyim wanted to be helpful, and they took like piles, like a few bamboos that were tied up together, like bundles of bamboos, and put them on top of the sukkah, just to make it easy for the people. The people would come, cut the string, and straighten out the bamboos, and they would have a kosher sukkah. Lamaisa, as the Gemara says, if you have a lot of bailam, so each relies on the other one, it came sukkahs, and it was a tzuma yisrael sukkahs. The bamboo in the bundles were up, nicely put. It was not bad, grad. It might have been silsumur b'chamas. Let's assume that was the case. But who put it up? A guy. That sukkah is puzzle. They didn't put it up l'shem mitzvah or l'shem tzeil because they knew that wasn't the job. They put it up to help the other person. So the emes is, if you have a bundle of 25 or more of bamboo, then that's schach puzzle because it's a gzeira. But this grada was just a few in each bundle. So even though the bamboos might have been kosher, but it wasn't put up l'shem tzeil. So the eighth would be, of course, after Yom Tiv, cut the strings, and a yid should lay out the schach to make it proper. Now here's the ironic thing. If the sukkah was very much needed, then what do? Let's say there's no other sukkah in the area. So believe it or not, we spoke about it a few weeks ago, if let's say the schach fell off the sukkah, and you have no sukkah, you have no place else to eat, you can't eat in somebody else's sukkah. So the Mishnah Pasuk, you can have a guy put on the schach and make the schach sukkah kosher. Why? Even though he's making an oil, but we could rely, it's only an oil aroi, and it's a mir la'akum, a shvus to shvus, mir la'akum, and only an oil d'Rabbanan, the makam mitzvah is mutter. So here, interesting enough, you're relying on the guy putting it on, once again, properly. But here, tell him, Reb Guy, listen closely. You got to put it on the Shem Tzeil. Shem Tzeil means to give us shade, to give us comfort. Fine. So you're rectifying what he missed earlier. So that's rather important to mention. Anytime that you have a mat, schach, fell off, whatever, all the various cases when there's a windy sukkah, you could have a guy put it back on Yom Tov or Shabbos. But tell him in no uncertain terms, do it l'shem tzeil, otherwise you're just perpetuating the problem, you're not making it any better. Now, the next question is, l'maisa, can an isha l'chatchila put up the bamboo mat, which is doable? So again, let's just remind ourselves that the Mechaba says that regarding tzitzis, that an isha could put on tzitzis. As the Mechaba holds, there's no problem of Rabbeinu Tam, no problem of Maram. So like the Mechaba, sukkah certainly can be done by an isha. The Ramah says toiv lechatchila, that an isha should not put on tzitzis. But who said that applies to a sukkah? There's no pasuk of Bnei Yisrael by sukkah. So if someone will say, I was machab my wife to put on the sukkah, I can't say it's wrong. To put on the schach, that's wrong. Rav Moshe in that shuv was asked about Noshim putting on the schach, and he's matir. So too is the Be'er Moshe, Mikidin. The Koyv Halachos says, Mut l'chatchila l'sachai de'isha. No of us, you have to realize, Rabbeinu Tam is not so excited about it. He holds his puzzle. Maram doesn't have a problem, but Rabbeinu Tam's Rabbeinu Tam. And the Chachma Shloimeh, Shloimeh Kluga, the Bikura Yakov. But the interesting thing is the Mishnah Berurah does not make any mention of an Isha not putting up the schach. I don't know which way he's indicating. Typically he quotes the Bikura Yaakov very often. Bikur Yaakov is machmer. Why didn't you quote the Bikur Yaakov? Could be held, taka, la halacha, it's okay. By tzitzis, we have a Bnei Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael. We don't find that by Sukkah. But the Maisa, we go so far to make everything perfect. Let us make this perfect as well. But if Isha put on the schach of the Sukkah, and now it's already Sukkahs, I would use it, make a brach on it, because like come out all the points, except for Rabbeinu Tam, the Sukkah is kosher. Now, of course, we want to be mahader, so after Yom Tiv, you put the schach on again, just don't tell the woman about it. But it's hard to say it's psul. Now, a guy that put it up, not l'shem tzeil, is psul. But an Isha is like the rest of us, that the stama is l'shem tzeil. Now, she doesn't have the lumdis l'shem tzeil, but l'shem sukkah should be enough. A cotton, again, according to Beinu Tam, is a problem. But with all the other shittas, have no problem. The Maram is not a problem because he's Bnei Yisrael. In fact, he's better than an Isha. The only shaila is, can a cotton do it l'shem tzeil? A cotton has very limited das. You have to have a chalois l'shem tzeil. So this is a prima godam kedarki very bekitza in Tafresh Lamerei Sif cotton aleph, the end. Cotton she'asa yesh loima ksheira ma'isa yesh lahem ayin chulin ma'isa im machshava. So what he's saying basically is that if stama machshava they don't have, but when they're doing a ma'isa, then you combine the ma'isa with the machshava, and especially when there's a gadol oymer al gabav who telling him what to do. So the Prima Godim, although he used the lashon yesh loim, he was great on Evis, he always said efshe yesh loim, but the Prima Godim seems to hold, and that's the way a lot of places can say as well, that the Maisa, a cotton that's putting it up and the father is there, could be even lachatchila, because the cotton has Shem Tzeil, he's not a chesaron of Bnei Yisrael, not a chesaron, the only thing is a Beinu Tam, okay, Beinu Tam is a Beinu Tam. But what's interesting is that the B'kurei Yankov is machmer, Kedarkei goes to Beinu Tam. In fact, Reb Chaim Brisk is quoting Sefer HaSukkah Amid Shin Aleph, a mitzvah boy put up the sukkah with the schach, but he didn't have a chsima zaken, he wasn't a gadol midaraisa, it was only as chazaka derava. And Chaim Brisk was makbid to do it over again. See, once you go with Rabbeinu Tam, then a cotton is psul. Once a cotton is psul, then the chayra, a bar mitzvah boy, is not yet a deraisa. And I taka so Orchas Rabbeinu in Chelik Beis Amid Reish Chav, where the stipler also, the Chazon Ish also had a concern where the god with the mitzvah boy has to be a gadol midiyai rice. Now Lamaisa, as we said earlier, that after Yom Tiv, even if let's say before Yom Tiv you put and you didn't know better and a cotton or an isha, put it up, so fine. But after Yom Tiv, it's kedai taka to have it lachatchila shabbat to have to put it up again. Again, you have to pick it up each one at the 3 tvachim. Just lifting it would make it enough. A really interesting shaila, I hope, which shouldn't be gay this year, but it happens often when we have sukkahs a little later in the season, and it's a windy time, windy season. And the question is, when you put down these bamboo mats, the schach mats as you call them, and a wind comes and blows it. Now, when we used to use the branches, so nothing, you needed a real strong wind. But here you just need a mild wind, and either sometimes the schach just lifts up and plops down. That's number one. It went up and came down. Aliyah and Yerida. Sometimes the bamboo mat flaps off the sukkah or over, let's say it folds into two like a sandwich. So now you have half the sukkah that's totally open. But the Rosh Hashanah kommt that zweite wind and blows it back. So the question is, when the wind either lifted it up off the sukkah and it fell back on its own, or the wind blew it off and it flapped back, what's the halacha in this case? So in the earlier places you won't find this because they didn't have this phenomenon of lightweight schach. So Lamaisa, let me tell you, let's start from scratch. Shulchan Aruch Tafresh Lamed Sif Aleph says beferish, if a schach flew onto the sukkah from a broken tree, whatever it is, but if it came on its own, it's psul. Psul midaraisa. It's not l'shem tzeil. Pashut. So, is our case similar? Zokta b'yashiv and Ashri ish chelik in Perik Chafei Sif Lamed Dalid. Even if it flew off and flew back, but the Maisa, once it was off b'psul, so how did it come back? By the wind. The wind is not doing l'shem tzeil. So he's looking what the wind did as missing l'shem tzeil. So this would be schach posel. What he says even more so, and that's his chiddush, even if the Bailam was watching and praying and hoping that the wind will bring it back, but he can't be mitzdarif the Bailam's das with the Baruch Sham's wind. Now we saw earlier that Taka the Sefer, the Oilas Yitzchak held that's okay. And Taka saw Halicha Shloima is emphatic in Perik Ches, Sif Yud Gimel, the Sefer HaSukkah, and the Miloyim Sim Yunal of Oiz Dalid, and the McDonald's Elio, beautiful Tshuva Chelik Dalid Ayin Tes, all say that if Taka it flew off, and it was Taka Puzzle, but it flew back and the Bailam was watching it and cheering it on, that we could use the Bailam's das. And I Taka saw it in the Oilas Yitzchak. Fine. But let's say the Bailam did not think that way. Someone told him, I saw your sukkah, boy, it was going for a ride. It went off and came back, and no one had das. Zokti McDonough Elio with other paiskim. That's possible. Comes again, Shevet Alevi, Chelik Yud Simon Kuf, and he was asked from the Rav in Kiryat Sefer, where they have it all the time. That's what he writes. I didn't know that, but that's what he's writing. That it flaps up and flaps down. So he says, Hasvara is, as long as it was somewhere above the sukkah, functioning as a sukkah, let's say in the typical case, it flew up and flew down. Even if it flew up 10 tvachim. But if it was on top of the sukkah, it never lost its hanacha l'shem sukkah. And he says, if part of it is flaps off, but the other part is back on, as long as it never lost its shem schach, even if that matzoh, maybe it's possible. But his point is, he says, it's ke'ein chavoit rami. The Sukkah concept and the Shabbos concept, that basically, as long as it was in the context of a Sukkah, part of it functioning as Sukkah, it should be okay. Rav Vosna says if it flapped off and lost connection to the Sukkah, then it's psul, even though it flew back. Rav Sternbuch in Chelikei, Simon Reish, Sifkot and Gimel, he gives even more makel. He says, as long as it ended back where it started, and the original hanacha was done by a balabas, the Shem Tzeil, that's also good. Now, I don't know exactly how he makes that work, but he says, I would even say, he puts in parentheses, maybe Yesh Ladaim, if it flew from Ruvain's sukkah to Shimon's sukkah, it's also good. Because Shimon will use Ruvain's hanacha because it's still functional. That's a big chiddush to me. Okay. But Lamaisa, it would all seem to agree, and this is important. It flew up and down, which is very typical. It's not a problem. Even though it flew higher than 3 tvachim, so maybe there's no din of lavud, but who cares? If it's functioning as a protective cover for the sukkah, it never lost its kashrus as a shem schach. What's interesting is Rav Nisna Karelitz in Chut Shani, in the end of Perik Beis, he says, he has also discussed all these shahs, because you know what, you're worrying about a technicality, when the wind comes, it's going to blow it off and blow it to the side. But why isn't it a problem that this schach seems to be not oimed ruach matzoh? You tell me it's flying here, flying ahead. There's something wrong with the stability of the sukkah, of the schach. That's what he wants to say. So he says that if lemaisa you say it's oimed ruach matzoh and it flaps up and down, fine. So lemaisa, I would make a point that when we have these lightweight schach, make sure that it's secure on the sukkah before Yom Tov. It flies off, it flies up. I mean, a lot of times it flies off entirely. You're really stuck. Now, of course, you have to do it al pi halacha. You have to keep in mind the concern of a maimid. We don't like to use a maimid that's makabel tumah. So do it properly la halacha. But this is more of preventive medicine. When you use a lightweight map, it happens too often. The wind blows it off, and you have to call the guy, and then the guy is putting on the schach. It's not gishmak. Do it in a way that it's secure, but doesn't lose its shem schach, and it's not violating the chumrah of being a maimid. Now, someone asked me a troubling question, and that is, I go to a public sukkah. Now, I'm not talking about a sukkah in a shul where there's a rab, there's a hashgacha. Let's say in a park or in a restaurant, and I'm not being moitzlaz on anybody at all, but he goes into a place. Who built it? And no one knows. The fellow behind the counter says, sukkah, he talks Spanish. He doesn't know anything about sukkah. So maybe he built it, but he doesn't know. The Begit says, no one around to ask, who built the sukkah? Now, it looks kosher. It's basic 4 walls. It has a bamboo mat. But do we have to assume that, can we assume that it was made l'shem tzeil? So, you need Ruach HaKodesh for that. And there's definitely no clout. Now, I'm very not much the Nervin type or the pessimistic type, but if you have a store, l'mashal, that the most religious person does not know much about anything, and he had the guy did it, and the guy didn't do l'shem tzeil, where are you heading? You ask the guy, did you do l'shem tzeil? And he shakes his head, with great hachno. He doesn't know what you're talking about. He doesn't speak English even. So make sure that the sukkah was made b'kashris. But it's something that has to be done properly. The interesting question is, if you look at it as a suffix deraisa, so then you have to know the mitzias. Again, I'm not saying anything about anybody, but if there is not much to rely on in the erlichkeit of this establishment, make sure that the sukkah was made l'shem sukkah. Beautiful shayla. Someone built the sukkah by himself, b'chvoidai, and everything is l'mahadrim. Here is supposed to be getting very cold, and he wanted to keep the sukkah as much as he can insulated, so he added another layer of schach to keep himself warm. Then, he was a Talmid Chacham, on Sukkot he realized, what did I do? That schach I added was not l'shem tzeil. If anything, I wanted to have it more and more of a thicker schach. Maybe he just ruined the sukkah, because he put on this level to keep him warm. That was his einfall. So I told him, good gefrekt, but let me tell you something. The Achashulchan in Taf Reish Chavtes Siv Bey, Taf Reish Lamed Hey, I'm sorry, Siv Beis, when he speaks about l'shem tzeil, to explain l'shem tzeil, goes, it can't be l'shem oitza, but l'shem tzeil means to sit and protect you from the sun, which is the Rashi's lashon. The sun is very hot in Middle Eastern countries, or in our Medina, he doesn't say it, but he means that in where he lived in Europe, where it's cold, to protect you from the cold. Now, this is very much interesting. The Achashulchan himself in Tafresh Chavtes Siv Beis discusses if you have a layer of snow on the schach, if it's a chatzitza, that passes the sukkah. Now, even if we have cooler sukkahs, we never had snow on sukkahs, right? So you have to put things in perspective. The Achashulchan lived in Navarduk, and it was very cold, and there was snow, and sukkahs is cold. But he says, Kalach Hayad, that l'shem tzeil probably includes keeping warm also. What does l'shem tzeil mean? Of course, typically, again, in Middle Eastern countries, it was the beating sun that you have to protect yourself. But he includes the Shem warmth as also part of dira. It's a dira saroy. So I would imagine that's why it would be okay. Now, the last few questions are basically a share for itself, but I have to mention at least halacha l'maisa. It's a very big sugya, but these two questions have to mention now, and hopefully get back to it a different time. People have some bigger homes, they have a backyard, and they have a sukkah that they build behechsher with schach, and they use it a whole year as a shed. They put a nice, strong schach on top of the sukkah, k'may shehi, and they use it sometimes during the rest of the year. Or people live in suburban areas; it's very common. They have a sukkah in the dining room. Actually, they have a regular dining room, and they cut out the top, and they put schach, and they have a beautiful sukkahs and matzoh they put on the roof, and they get ready for the winter. Now the question is, how does that fit into this picture of sukkah l'shem tzeil? You're using it for an oitza, you're using it a whole year, you're dying using a whole year. So the Mr. Bura in Tafresh Lamed Vav Sif Kot and Ches quotes the Bekura Yakov, and he taka says that this is a problem, because if you made it into a non-sukkah, or worse yet, you made it into a bias, a diras kva, Rashi is psal. It has to be a l'shem diras aroy. If you made it for tzeil, you made it good. You made it for tzeil on sukkah, but now you're making it as a storage, as a shed. So it became psal. And Taka, the Ashrei Ish of Bayashiv and Amid Kufay and Beis, has these two tziurim, sukkah bebeisai and sukkah bemarpeses, on a porch. And then they have more porches, and they keep it up a whole year, and they use it a whole year. This should be a problem. However, Reb Shlomo Zalman, and that's in Sefer HaSukkah, has a lengthy discussion on Mataf Memches, and in Minhag Tinyana, the end of Siman Nunvav, more Bekitza, he says that basically, if you made it, if you use it as a sukkah, the sukkah is a sukkah, but using it as a bias or a shed, but the schach is still visible, that might be a problem. But if you put the roof on and the schach's on top of it or in between it, and it's no longer functional as a sukkah, so right now, avad it's not a sukkah. But when you take away the roof, that's making it l'shem sukkah. You don't have to pick up the schach. Rabbi Yasha felt that if the sukkah became psal, you have to lift up the schach and put it back again. That Taka of Zalman feels me, who said, if you, again it's very rare to see it, but if you have the schach where it is, and a few inches above that you put the roof. So you're sitting in the sukkah, now you made it a Shem Dira, and using it on sukkah is pasnished. But if the roof totally covers the schach, either on top or bottom, but you don't even see it. So now it's a different mitzvah. But the schach is not being used, the Shem Dira. Once you took off the roof, you're back to a Sukkah Ksheira. And here you don't even need to have uplifting of the schach. That part is not even necessary. Now, Lamaisa, let's not be too worried. In the worst scenario, even according to those that are machmir, this has to be, the schach is psul. All you have to do is pick up the schach and put it back. Some people take out off the schach at the end of the sukkahs and put it on the roof, and that's sicha psul. One last point I want to tell you, interesting chiddush, the Mishnah and Tov Reish Lam Medvav Sif Kot and Zayin quotes a Chayodam. Zog the Chayodam. If you have a sukkah, Imeres Mishana Lashana, the sukkah is kosher. But he says, if you use it in Tov Shin Pei Hey, you built it Arab Tov Shin Pei, use it, you kept it up till Tov Shin Pei Vav. Now, even though it wasn't used anything else, but once it went through a sukkah, and oy sukkah, it lost the Shem Sukkah, you have to put up the schach l'Shem Sukkah. Why? And he brings a raya, Magen Avram, Tov Reish Lamed Ches Sif Cotton Beis, that if you kedushas atzei sukkah achal for the 8 days, after sukkahs it's ois kedusha. What do you see? Once it was used and the mitzvah finished, it expired. So Zokti Mishtabur, according to this Magen Avram, so maybe when the sukkah was good Tavshin Pei, it expired on the Shmini Atzeres Simchata, whatever it is. Now you have to make the new schach on Tavshin Pei Vav. A new chiddush, not aus bayis dira, aus the schach became psul. Tainit, the sukkah, the Emek Bracha, beautiful taina. He said, I don't understand. This is in Emek Bracha Sukkah Ois Yud, a very kishmaka taina. When you have kedusha, the question is there kedusha still? So after sukkah is ois sukkah, ois kedusha. But here, what do you have to have? A sukkah that was built l'shem tzeil. So who cares if sukkah's ended, but l'shem tzeil blives in the sukkah? So what's wrong? Why do you have to take the schach and put it back? What's wrong the way it is? Maybe the kedusha expires, but the building l'shem tzeil remains. Zokta meyadam is manam in Chelik Al Simon Pei, beautiful that there's no din of l'shma. What the Mishnah holds, no din of l'shma. The only thing is that Lamaisa the Asiya was made l'shem tzeil. But once the new year came and it's no longer l'shem tzeil, then there's no reason that the tzeil continues either. So Lamaisa, in all these cases, I must tell you, if you have it, best would be to lift up the schach and put it back. And I guess the Cheretz Kodmel Torah, the last halacha, which is probably most important to me, I saw Rav Zilberstein in his sefer in Tuvchi Abiyu. He says that he made an announcement in his kehillah before Sukkot. There are some Sukkot I will not visit on Sukkot. People got nervous. Maybe they don't trust the kashrut, whatever. You know why? Because at night I heard people banging, putting up Sukkot, and it was disturbing other people's sleep. They were building beyond hours than when people are trying to sleep. And he described it very dramatically. People work the whole day, they're trying to get some sleep. They already took a sleeping pill, but banging. So he says he feels that if you make sukkah late at night, not late at night, when people are trying to sleep, it might be a mitzvah b'avera. And he said the ushpizin do not come to that sukkah that disturb people's sleep. So please build the sukkah at normal hours. You should have a wonderful Yom Tov. A good Yom Tov to you.
Shem irgendwie יותר, like you be a schach, or Smith today's share. There's some after Kaddish, the Smith says Sikkim. Van Anja van elkaar Shem als we mogen zaken is hetzelfde hier met haar missionaris en gewoon van Sukkah. Gagel te viade. Gagel is Kaddish made up. Er is allemaal gezegd van die kan misschien geven. Jij gaat weten, dan ga je wel weten zo waar Gagel naar Kaddish mama. Kaddish made up. Maar dan gewoon lang. Yeah, I'm coming across, so shit else is possible. Maybe I'm not going to make I saw the one what time they got on me, they saw me on call my lost, and I said, die was dan was hij dan alleen nog eens maar beginnen met vragen met hij die dat in de wereld kan moest mij weer halen man nee ze maar met mij gaan tijd maar alleen wat kan zo man zo alleen maar ja zo alleen wat kan zo man zie hem
The schach we learned today, Bez Hashem, the ikka the sukkah is the schach. A person that made the sukkah l'shem tzeil, there's no din of l'shma, that is perfect. Yes, there's a mitzvah of boyos מבשלוחו, just like in Halachos buying for Shabbos, and the sweat is a very choshev and all, but that doesn't mean that there's a din of lishma. That's why Sukkah's ganvach is kosher if it's made l'shem tzeil, even though it's not made l'shma. The walls have no dinim regarding the shem tzeil. The walls can be made l'shem bayis, but as long as the schach was put on l'shem tzeil, that makes the sukkah kosher. If it's made for other purposes, la'oitza, for schoira, or even diras kvad, if it's made for that diras kvad, that's taka psul, and it becomes the choira, becomes schach psul. A person that has a sample sukkah that he made to show customers and he never used it and he didn't want people to use it, no doubt about it, that was psul, that's considered l'shem schoira. If someone built it stam, he never heard of this gemara, temteil, so it's kosher because stam sukkah al shem the schach, tetzeil, and sukkah is hainuhach. Some say it's better to have a mind shem tzeil than shem sukkah, some say both are good, probably both are good, but basically it has to be l'shem tzeil. In the case that a branch fell off a tree onto a sukkah and made the sukkah kosher, it did make the sukkah kosher. Even though now there's enough schach, but that's not l'shem tzeil. Whenever you have a schach that was put on l'shem tzeil, it's kosher, it remains kosher. If it's put on bepsul, it's not all lost. You could lift it up, lav dafka 3 tvachim, lift it up and put it back. Beinu Tam says a tremendous chiddush that you have to have a bar chiyuva for all mitzvahs, so goyim, noshim, and ketanim cannot build a sukkah or even put the lulav together with the other minim or put it on tzitzis. The Maram held there's only a problem by tzitzis, noshim, because b'nei Yisrael v'noi b'noi Yisrael, but miyikid din, as far as we're concerned, a goy, isha, or cotton that put on even the schach, if it was the shem tzeil, would be kosher. The Mishnah and many other poskim advise lechatchila have a bar chiyuva, and maybe even a bar chiyuva, a gadol that's chsim azokin. That's all the mehadrin. But if an isha or a cotton built a sukkah, or even a goy built a sukkah, and it was done the shem tzeil, that sukkah should be kosher for the 8 days of sukkahs. A goy that built it because of it's a religion or whatever it is with very vague kavanah, that's a problem. A goy that put up the schach thinking the balabas would put it on for the shem mitzvah, it wasn't the shem tzeil, that's a problem. When a bamboo mat flew off the sukkah, you could have a guy put it back, but tell him a shem tzeil. If the wind lifted something and it flew back, so you can rely on that's kosher, as long as if it was somehow connected to the sukkah. An isha that put it on again b'diavad is definitely kosher. Make sure that the schach will stay there. If a ruach matzoh is going to blow it off, then take provision before sukkahs to make sure that it's secure. A public sukkah hopefully is made l'shem tzeil. If you add schach just to keep it warmer, that's also considered l'shem tzeil. A sukkah that's over the year, at most, again, the fact that the walls were deer is not a problem. At most, the problem is the schach, so be a sport. Put back the schach l'shem sukkah, l'shem tzeil, and your kosher. And of course, build the sukkah when it doesn't disturb others. Yes, Kohen.
Chag Sameach, everyone. Next year from Rav Smith will be Thursday. This Thursday, first day Chol Hamoed at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock, first day Chol Hamoed.
I'll look at it fine.
You open it up right when you start talking.